That ever-growing curiosity may have started the first time an old man named Ikey P. Rolfe told us about who he called the Lady in the Bay. But we were just as consumed with all of the twists and turns that old man seemed to purposefully add to his tale over the years. Looking back at his perpetual embellishments, they all seemed to be so strategically placed, and when it came to Claire and I, they always seemed to contain just the right amount of encouragement to set us out on our own youthful adventures. When I think about that old man and how he so proudly passed his hidden lessons on to his young followers, I honestly believe they achieved everything that he intended them to. Ike was definitely unlike anyone that I had ever met. I never knew how old he was, but to us kids, he looked ancient. I mean, really, really woolly mammoth or even mastodon ancient. Ike was a tall, slender man, and he had the darkest brown, wrinkled skin. It was almost as if he was forever etched and tinted from obviously rarely ever leaving the direct blast of the sun. He also had this majestic, semi-long, flowing white hair that seemed to glow as a full moon would. That is, if he ever took his hat off long enough for anyone to actually get a peek at it. I knew he had his own house somewhere, but I don't think he ever went to it, because no matter whether it was early in the morning or very late at night, he always seemed to be outside doing something. Most of the time, whatever that something was, had to do with helping my grandfather in some way or being near that salt water that was so graciously wrapped all around the tiny island that we were on. To say the least, Ike was a very unique man. He always seemed to touch everyone's life in just the right way, and most often his touch occurred when his intended recipients needed it the most. The funny thing is, regardless of his leathered outward appearance, he had these deep, dark crystal blue eyes and a supremely kind and protective heart that seemed to be as youthful as anyone's ever was. If your eyes are truly the windows to the soul, Ike's were so pure that you could almost see all the way to the bottom of his essence. It was always a welcomed and profoundly regal sight, too. My family's friendship with Ike would last many lifetimes, although they rarely outlasted his. He proudly gave credit for his longevity to claims of being a descendant of a great Powhatan Indian chief. I don't know if he was an actual Native American kind of Indian or not, but he certainly did look the part, and he spoke it just as well. The one thing I know for a fact was if Ike had something to say, there was definitely going to be a few strategically placed enhancements along the way, but also a surprising amount of hidden truths to his words as well. Ike's stories may not have revealed themselves in the exact way he told them, but there was always a lesson to be learned and a mission to be off on after hearing such possibilities. Speaking of real-life Indians, the first time I met Ike was outside of an old country store, a little store on Gwynn's Island named Scrooch's. My grandfather chewed tobacco, and one afternoon, much to his chagrin, he completely ran out of his greatly treasured commodity. In response to his dilemma, we had to make an emergency trip to that quaint little store. The rest, for my family anyway, was history. The first day I met Ike, long before I knew what a cigar store Indian was, I thought I was seeing one. He was leaning on the corner of that old building with his hat perched down over his face, and he, or what I thought was an it, wasn't moving a muscle. I honestly couldn't tell if the man was real or not at the time. As my grandfather and I got out of the truck to enter the store, that old man, who I very much thought was a wooden statue, still didn't move, not even after I accidentally brushed up against him as we passed by.